and you, oh, sorry. Can everyone see my screen? All good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about $25 a month, and in it you get Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, so kind of all the things you'll be using in your first year. So to get started, I'd recommend downloading that if you don't have it already. Okay, let me just reshare. So I'm just going to start off by opening Illustrator. Oh, sorry. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Oh.
Everything's good. I can see it.
Illustrator, okay, great. So when you open up the application, it'll bring you to this screen if you don't have a working file on already. So here it'll just show some of your most recent documents, or it'll give you some templates of things you can start to open. And then, but on the far left, it'll be an option for create new. So since we're starting a base plan from scratch, you'll click new, and then it'll bring you to this page. And this is, again, it shows you some preset dimensions of different artboards you can use. But today we were going to be using 11 by 17, which is just the basic tabloid layout. So if it isn't already showing 11 by 17, you can plug in the dimensions here. So depending on what the lengths are in your assignment requirement, you can just type them in here. And then I'm just going to call it Yorkville base plan for now. And then as well, it'll show you the dimensions. So let's say you knew the page size in centimeters. It'll also give you the conversions as well. And then make sure it's in landscape orientation. You can also have it in portrait mode as well. But I think based on the site plan that you have on CourseLink, I don't know if you've downloaded already, but it shows the site runs horizontally from west to east. So landscape is probably the best option for that. And you'll only need about one artboard at the moment. Once you start to go into more diagramming and adding different pages, that's where you'll add different artboards. But for now, since we only have the site plan, you'll just need one. And then this doesn't really matter at the moment. And then if you go to more settings, it'll just get more specific in terms of like the units you'll be working in, as well as the color mode. RGB is fine for now, since you're going to be working on monitors. Nadia, are you guys printing like the final results, or is it all digital?
It's going to be digital for now.
Okay, great. So let's say you were printing anything, then you'd want to work in CMYK, because I know if you do any work in RGB and then you print it, the colors can get switched when you have the final printed result. So for now, RGB is fine, but if you were printing, let's say, you'd want to switch that. And then this is just showing the resolution. You always want to make sure it's on high. These are all preset as well, so you don't really have to be too specific, but just so that you know, and for future. And then this is just kind of irrelevant for now as well. So once this is all selected and you have your everything selected that you want, it'll bring you to this blank artboard. So essentially anything inside the artboard will show up in the final file or export or print, and then anything on the outside won't show up. So just keep that in mind when you're doing work, that you want to make sure that your whole drawing fits within this artboard range. Okay, so once you've downloaded the 1 to 500 site plan from CourseLink, I'm just going to stop sharing and bring you to my files. So another way you can also start the document is by going to your files, and let's say you have the site plan. Can you see my files? I reshared the screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's say you have the base plan and you don't have a file already created. You can also, another way to open it up is right click and then go to open with, and then Illustrator should show up here. And then it should open up your PDF file or JPEG, or it should be a PDF though, the one from CourseLink. So once you've uploaded this, let's say you have the file first and you want to switch the artboard after, you can do this by going to File and Document Setup. So essentially it's the same thing we did previously, but you're just working backwards now. It's never permanent, your artboards, you can always change them by going back to Document Setup. So right now, I'm not sure, I think the artboard size is the size of the image, so we want to change that to 11 by 17. So if you go up to the top here, it'll give you some options in terms of dimensions. So we know we want the width.
Hey, Abby, sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off. I think
no
you're just sharing the wrong screen. We can't see the other screen.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, right now it's stopped, yeah.
I know that's the thing I don't like about Zoom. Sometimes it doesn't update. Okay, how about now? Can you see the site plan with Illustrator? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if you need me to repeat anything, feel free, just interrupt. I don't mind. I can always go back. So once you've opened up your site plan, you can go back to change the document. Here, I'm just gonna the document dimensions by going to Document Setup, and then should bring you to this screen, and then select Edit Artboards. Why isn't it? Okay, sorry, I think it lagged. Okay, so in the top here, it's very small, but it should show the width and then as well as the height. So you want to change the width to 17 inches and then the height to 11. You can also type it in. So for example, if you knew the dimensions in centimeters, you can directly type in, let's say it was 20 centimeters, so 20 cm, and then it'll do the conversions for you. So it's great that way. So now you can see that it's changed the artboard. And then I'm just gonna go back as well. Let's say I wanted to change the orientation. The options are all here. Or if I wanted to add another artboard, you just click the plus here or delete one. So it's pretty simple in terms of setup. You can always go back and change it, like I said. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far about opening files or importing?
Yes, sorry, Abby.
Yeah.
Abigail, does it distort drawings if you alter the dimensions of what you import?
So that's a good question. So I'm going to go into scaling next. So when you bring in an image, it shouldn't distort unless you, let's say you brought it in and you dragged to fit it, then it would distort. But dragging it in, it should maintain the file size with the different dimensions like of the file. You can also just drag and drop directly from like your desktop as well, and it should maintain it. But the best way to check, or the quickest way to check to see if the map's to scale, is just for this assignment's sake, since there's a scale bar included for the site plan. It's hard to tell on the file since it's very blurry, but it should show, this should say like where my cursor is, 10 meters, and that's how much it'll be in real life. So this scale bar, that would be, it should say 10 there. So the easiest way to check it, so since it's a 1 to 500 scale map, 1 centimeter on the drawing would equal to 5 meters, sorry, in real life. So this, since it's 10 meters, this scale bar here, since this is 0, this should be about 2 centimeters. It's kind of like quick conversions, but the easiest way to do it is you can go, I'm going to go more into detail about just some of the simple commands on Illustrator, but for now, if you go to the line segment tool and just click it once, it should give you some options. So if I just typed in, actually first, you have to remember to go back. So before you start working, since you'll probably be using centimeters and metric in this assignment, if you go to document setup, make sure your units are in centimeters. That way, anything you add in, any shape, when you type in dimensions, it'll give you the measurement in centimeters. It'll just make it easier for now. So now that we switched it to centimeters and we go to draw our line, See how now it's showing in centimeters. I'm just gonna type in 2 centimeters and then make sure it's at 180-degree angle. Fill doesn't really matter at the moment. It's gonna give me a 2 centimeter line. I'm just gonna add a stroke to that quick so you can see. So quickest way to show if it is to scale. So see how it perfectly lines up. So that 2 centimeters is showing that 10 meters in real life. So this drawing is essentially already to scale. So that's how you know it's not like distorted. Because I know on Illustrator it's very it's kind of harder to draw. Like if you were using AutoCAD or Rhino, you can draw things to scale like in real life, but since it's Illustrator and you're working on like a paper size kind of like artboard, that's just like the quickest way and easiest way to like make sure a drawing's to scale if it has that scale bar in it.
Abby, can you even show them the rulers like under the view or windows, like bringing up the rulers?
Sorry.
That will help them, as guides.
So if you go to view, there's a lot of different options. So if you scroll down to near the end, there's an option that says rulers. And if you click on show rulers at the top, it'll have, so since our units are also in centimeters, each of these will be 1 centimeter. So I don't know if you can also bring the rulers down as well. But as guide, oops, sorry. So essentially this will just help you show, so like for example, from here to here is about 2 centimeters, and then that just shows that it's like the same as well. And then there's also the grid options as well to help you when you're drawing things on Illustrator, just to help with dimensions as well. Just trying to think of anything else. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and you could drag like what you did. If you go where the rulers are, if you just drag from the rulers from your left mountain, that bring guides, and so you could actually match them up with different lines. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Abby. That's awesome.
No problem. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back. So now that I have my 2 centimeter line where the scale bar is, since this drawing at the very end, you're gonna hide this layer. Once you've put in all your own work, you're gonna have to create your own scale bar because this one will disappear. So now we'll get into layers. So I think on the assignment brief, it'll show, I think there's like, based on my memory, there's a list of layers that you have to include in the assignment, and then you can always add your own based on your own, how much you decide to put into your drawing. But just to get you started, so right now, if you go to this part on Illustrator on the sidebar, there'll be a layer section, and essentially layers are your friends. They're the best way to keep your drawing organized, and it also helps in terms of when you're adding different line weights. It's also easier to keep your layers organized in terms of like the hierarchy of like how these objects will appear in space. So for example, everything on the bottom. So I'm just going to add a few more layers, for example. So I'm going to move this one up just so you can see. So everything on the bottom of the list will show at the below, and then everything on the top of the list will show above. So if you move these layers around, so see how now the red layer, which our line was on, now it's showing below or beneath this map. That makes sure when you're doing your drawing to keep in mind how do I describe this simply? So everything that you want showing, for example, like roads, ground cover, anything on like ground level will probably be on a lower layer, and then anything that's showing higher in space, like for example, like the tree canopy or buildings will show on top, as well as like cars or anything that's going to be sitting on top of the ground. So I like to get started with some of the layers I already know that I'm going to be using in my drawing. So for example, I'm going to call this layer north arrow and scale bar. And the colors don't necessarily matter. It's just a way of helping you see the selection. So for example, when I click on this circle here, everything on Illustrator that appears blue, it'll show that's where that layer is. And then, for example, anything red is on that layer. So we have this one on our north arrow and scale bar, and then we can also do roads, and then we'll call this one pathways, and then ground cover. Call this one vegetation. Then we'll call this one trees just for now. So like I said before, everything on the bottom of the list shows on the bottom, like on the layer below, and then as you go up in the list, that's how it represents on your artboard as well. So just keep that in mind. So if you see that something isn't showing, sometimes it could be it's switched underneath something in your layer, or it's in a sub layer and it's hidden. So always try and keep track of your layers while you're working before the drawing gets too complicated. It'll just really help yourself in the end. So we'll go back to drawing the north arrow and scale bar just in terms of making simple shapes on Illustrator to get you started. So since we're going to start adding things to, here, I'll just zoom out. Adding things to Illustrator, you want to make sure you lock your base layer. That way, as you can see my cursor, nothing is moving when I click it. Whereas I can select this and move it, and then the base map isn't, it remains in its spot. So that's also helpful. And then you can also hide it as well if you don't want to see something when you're working on another layer. So for now, we're just going to go back and finish up making our scale bar, since we'll be getting rid of this base plan at the very end. So just make sure you make it as accurate as you can. So just to start off, some of the simple commands on Illustrator. So you have your pen tool, which you'll be drawing like a lot of your shapes with. And then you also have the curvature tool. So for example, the pen tool works by anchor points. So essentially, if you click on one of the anchors that are already existing, or you could just click anywhere on the artboard, it'll you can draw a line from that point to anywhere you want, essentially. So we're just going to create this tick in the scale bar. And then if you want for there to be no angle on the line segment, just hold down Shift, and then that way it just moves on the axes. Whereas if you don't hold it down, you can draw it anywhere. So just draw it up. And also the great thing about Illustrator too is it has some guides on there that'll help you line everything up when you're drawing. So for example, if I wanted to find the midpoint in this, it should say intersect here. So then that way I know that this mark is the 2 meter mark, or on our map, it's about 1 centimeter on the artboard. So once we have that anchor point, you can just draw it up. Oh, why is this? So now we have where the 0 will show, and then we have our midpoint, and then we have our 10 centimeter. And then also you have the text command, or the type tool. So it's kind of like Word, where you can click anywhere on the artboard, create a text box. And then this just shows over here the different alignments. So you have like the align left, then the center, and then also the right. And then just there's some more options in here. But for now, I'm just going to create one with a center alignment. And if you double click it, you can edit. So I'm going to do 0 meters because that's where our scale bar starts. If you double click it as well, you can change the font. So there's like already preset fonts in here, and then you can also add in more from Adobe, depending on if you were looking for a certain font. So for example, I'm just going to change it to this. And then there's also bold options, italic, just like the normal, but some of the fonts you don't have those options. So just make sure to click ones where you can have those different options. I think with Franklin Gothic, there's like different options. It's not just in the scroll down part, if that makes sense. But just for now, I'll just keep it on regular. And then you also have the different sizes. If you know the size font that you want to change it to, you can also type it in. But for now, I'm just going to make it small since it's just a scale bar. So now we have our 0, and then I'm just going to copy and paste that and align it there to make our 5 meter, and then align it there for our 10. Okay, so now we have our scale bar with our numbers added. So since we don't want these all separate, the easiest way to group it is by selecting it all. You can also hold down Shift and select all the objects that you want to group. And then if you go to Object and then Group as well, or Control G, that will group them all together, so that you can easily move around your objects without them being separate. Also, if you don't want to select everything, and then group it, you can also go to your layers and click on everything, and then that will group them as well, but they won't like permanently group them, just like temporarily, if that makes sense. And then, sorry, I forgot to group. Okay, yeah, so everything now is grouped, so I can move my scale bar around and everything stays together. And then to make a basic north arrow, I'm just going to trace this one here since it's already showing where north is, so it's pretty simple. So underneath the pen and the curvature tool, there's the rectangle, ellipse, which is circle as well, and then polygon, and then star, and then line segment. So those are some very like basic shapes, which you can actually create a lot on this site plan using just a few of those. But for now, I'm just going to use a circle. So if I just drag by holding down my cursor, you can create a circle. If you want it a perfect circle, you can hold down Shift, and then that way it will maintain the perfect radius. Let's say I knew the width or the width or the radius of the circle, I could also type that in. But for now, since I'm just tracing the existing one, I'm just going to make one relatively around the same size. And then I'm going to make the stroke a lot thinner. I'm also
I'm gonna quick comment there. So that's great. Thanks, Abby. If you notice at the top where she has the word stroke, that's where we're considered line weights, right? So if you're thinking of line weights, making things thicker or thinner, you could just go there and actually change the point size, right? So for things that are not as relevant, like the north arrows, you would make that fairly thin. And the same then when you're starting to draw the trees, you can make some of them thicker and then some of them thinner to give variations, okay? So that's where you would have the thicknesses of lines. It's same thing like when you have with your sections.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to go into line weights. So like Nadia said, that's found in stroke. So you can change this here. I typically don't like to go for drawings. I don't typically go above 1 or 2, just because you want to keep it delicate. So let's say you were printing it, then the lines won't read thick, because these ones are, once you go down more, it gets pretty they get pretty thick. So anything below 1 will just keep your drawing a little bit more light and delicate. And essentially, like Nadia said, anything thinner will show up. If you're looking at a drawing, you want to use line weights. So for example, things that you want to appear higher or more evident in space will be a thicker line weight. So for example, like a tree canopy will be thicker than a ground cover hatch, just to show depth in your drawing. Because if you were, let's say you drew everything in 0.25 line weight, everything would read on the same plane in space. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're working, as well as with your layers. Just the ones that are higher on the list, maybe not necessarily all the time, but on your list of layers, sometimes anything on the top would probably be thicker, and then vice versa. Things that are on the ground cover or roads typically would be a little bit thicker since they're more hardscape, if that makes sense. So just kind of keep in mind like how things would appear in real life. You translate that by playing around with different line weights. So I'm just going to finish up drawing this north arrow. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm just going to make that thicker. And then like before, I'm just going to group this. So then I have my north arrow as well. So when you hide this, it'll just show now you have the scale bar and then your north arrow. So those are just some simple shapes that you can use in Illustrator. Okay. Anyone have any questions so far?
Let's take a few minutes for any questions as she goes on. Any questions? Okay, I guess you can move on. Maybe you could draw a few of the trees and add some textures, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna zoom out so you can see my screen. So when making a base plan, I like to start kind of with things that kind of contain the space. So for example, this is a great example, like a great site plan to be working with, because there's a lot of rectilinear shapes and straight lines. So I'll start off with some roads because that'll just kind of help create the overall shape of the site. So before you get started drawing on that layer, I'm just gonna lock this. Make sure you have the layer you want to start drawing on selected. So now that everything's locked, I'm just gonna show you how to draw, for example, like a street. So using the pen tool and then as well as the offset command. Actually, it's gonna go back to this layer. I'm just gonna draw a simple rectangle around my site plan, just so that I have kind of like an outline of my site. Okay, so to draw a road, I'm just gonna start from this point and take it to about here. And then again, if you wanted a straight line on like 180-degree angle, just hold down shift, and then that way you can draw it on the axis. So I'm just gonna quickly measure. So this is about, the width of this road is about 1.38 centimeters. So just to make it as accurate as possible, you can draw one side of the road and then on different parts of the site and then offset it so that they're all about the same width. So to do so, just select the line you want to offset and then go to object. And then if you scroll down to path, there'll be an option that says offset path. And then it'll give you some options. So 1.38 1.38 centimeters. It'll just show you a preview, so see how it's just offsetting from this point about 1.38 centimeters. So instead of drawing the line, I'm just gonna delete. So I'm just gonna hide this for a second so you can see. So another important tools to kind of understand are just the selection and the direct selection tool. So selection is kind of self-explanatory. You can select the objects and then move them. And then direct selection, if things are grouped, it just kind of helps you. If you double click on the line, you can click on specific points when it's a grouped object. So for example, these were all joined, but I want to get rid of these lines. So I just selected with the direct selection tool and then I deleted it, and then same with this one. And then that way I'm left with just the outline or the offset path, sorry, of the offset line, sorry. And then let's say I was done drawing my road. I'm just gonna turn this off. So you can see as well. So once you start to get into like hatches and fills, you want to make sure any of the lines that you've created are joined or closed shapes. So that way, if I wanted to add, let's say, like a gravel texture, it'll only go within that confined space or object. So I have to do, so let's say I drew, let's just close this off. I'm just gonna move. So you want to make sure also that the anchor points are connected. So the anchors are where they'll join. Again, kind of self-explanatory. So let's say I've selected all the lines, and let's say they're not joined. You can go down to path as well, and then click join, and then that way your shape is closed. So then let's say I wanted to add a fill. So stroke, like Nadia said, is the outline or important when you want to do different line weights. And then fill is anything on the inside of the shape. So I'm just gonna put, where's this one? So let's say, yeah, so that just kind of shows that, see how inside the fill, nothing is spilling out, it's all within that shape. So when you're drawing roads or different shapes freehandedly and not using some of like the already the shapes that are already existing here, just reminder to join your objects together so that when you go back and add fills, that they're all easily appear. If that makes sense. Just trying to think of what else. Another tool. Okay, so we have a roadway. Another
there's a question.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat. I'm just gonna.
That's okay. I was wondering, see how the road on the side there, just before, like right where it says Cumberland Street, has a curve?
Yeah.
Are you able to make the line, like, could you continue on with that to have a curved road in Illustrator?
Yeah, so let's say I just close it off for the sake of fill. So if you go to the curvature tool, let's say I want to create this curve here. So I click on an anchor point. I'll just do this one because it's selected.
That's with the pen tool, right? Or did you use the other? Yeah.
The curvature. So it's
the curvature tool.
Yeah. So you can essentially just trace around the existing one. I think there's another option. Oh, maybe I'm thinking about Rhino.
Rhino has the fillet tool.
Yeah, fillet. So yeah, I know that's the thing with Illustrator and Rhino. Once you start to work with a bunch of different softwares, you kind of, there's some software where it's like really there's commands that are really easy and help make your life really easy, and then some of the other ones don't have necessarily the same one, so you kind of have to like figure it out as you go. But if you draw one of them, so let's say I can,
Yeah, that's a good one to use because it gives you flexibility. It's just tracing it.
Yeah, and with this assignment too, it's everything's like the shapes are pretty simple shapes. So in terms of accuracy, it's pretty, you can get as close to the original or the site plan like that from CourseLink. It's pretty easy to make it as close to it, just using like the simple shaped commands on Illustrator. So let's say I'm just gonna sorry for a second, I'm just gonna figure something out. Just gonna get okay, so let's say I drew this side.
Are you using a flip?
Yeah, so I'm going to offset it. That's weird. So let's say I just copied and pasted it, so I keep the original one. But if you go to Object 2 and Transform, there's a bunch of different commands. So in terms of scale, reflect and rotate, those are probably the ones you'll use the most. So for example, reflect. If you do it horizontally, you can directly flip it as well. So then that way, and then you can just line it up afterwards.
Perfect.
So then that way you have the two lines, and then do the vice versa for the other side. So for example, if you wanted to draw say, this one, like this side, you could just flip it vertically as well. So just reflecting it on the different side, just so that it maintains the same angle. Just how it would be in real life, like a roadway wouldn't have different, like, yeah, if that kind of makes sense. But yeah, so try and use, instead of, for accuracy, try and use some of the reflect and the flip tools just for accuracy, versus freehanding all of them is what I would recommend. I can also go over, so I'll just draw another simple shape. So for the trees, I guess you could do just a circle command with the point, but if you wanted a little bit more detail, you could always bring in images from that you find online and use them for your site plan. But since it's a grayscale drawing, I believe, you'll want to use as much like vectors instead of JPEGs and PNGs, just to keep it clean and simple. So I'm just going to bring in an image of a tree, top view. Can everyone see it?
Yep. Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, now it's working. Okay, so I just brought this in from Google Images. It's just a simple top view of a tree. And a command I often use on Illustrator that's really handy, especially when you're adding detail to your site plan, is the image trace command. So when you click on your image, I'm just going to put this quickly on the tree layer. When you bring in your image, it'll show you different options here as well. So image trace is here, or if you go to object and go down, should appear as well here. So just click image trace and make, and then what it'll do is it'll essentially turn your JPEG or your PNG into vector lines. So that way you can go back and change like the outline of it. You can change the stroke, you can edit it, add a fill. It's really great in terms of giving your drawings, like if you're creating like a line drawing, it's really nice in terms of adding detail instead of just adding in images. And also when you're printing after, it's a lot more precise sometimes. So what we've done essentially is created an outline of the image. There's also some different options. So it'll just kind of show you a preview. But for now, since it's a black and white drawing, just tracing result is fine. So right now you can't edit it. But to do so, just make sure you click expand and then object and then ungroup. Image trace, I'm not sure why it does it, but when you image trace it, it makes a grouped, it groups all the vectors together. So now, sorry, I'm just gonna make this smaller. So once you ungroup it, you can delete everything you don't want in that drawing. So I'm just going to get rid of all this. Right now it has a fill on it, but we want to switch it so that it's an outline. And it's looking a little bit too thick, so I'm going to change it to 0.5. And then typically for trees too, sometimes you even want to add just a white fill to it. So then that way, since you want them to appear on top of everything else, adding a white fill will just kind of hide anything below. If you put a transparent fill, so for example, see how, let's just say, it's going to make this a little bit smaller. Let's say we drew this tree and it was in a garden. With the fill, you don't see that line underneath, but if I have a transparent fill on it, then it'll show everything below. So just keep that in mind with some of the elements you're drawing in the tree, or sorry, in the space, just to keep your drawing clean and not busy. So image trace is a great option. I think next week I was going to go into when you start adding hatches, you can also create your own hatches using image trace as well, which is also really handy. Any questions in terms of that?
This is great. Maybe just show them the transparency, and then, for example, like there was multiple like alignments of trees, they just copy paste, or the Alt button. And that's it. I think that should be good for today. We
Okay.
went through a lot.
So I'm just going to turn this back on. So let's say I wanted to start adding a lot more trees. So you can scale it down to the size you want just by holding shift. That kind of maintains the shape. If you don't do that, then it'll kind of warp it or distort the original shape. So if you just hold down shift, you can scale your newly image trace tree or any other shape. And let's say I wanted to create this kind of the rows of trees here. So if you hold it down and just copy and paste, you can just start to add them in.
So like a Control-C and Control-V.
Yeah. And then another great thing about Illustrator too is if you go, all the commands are up here pretty much. It should show some of them, like the more basic ones that you use like often, like group is Control-G, Control-C, Control-V. It should be up here as well. Also toolbars, right now I have the basic on, but advanced just kind of has a lot more down here. So let's say I'm just going to add a lot more trees. Okay, so let's say I have all the trees that I want, and they're on the layer that I want as well. what you can also do just to clean up your drawing, since you just want to maybe show the canopy and not necessarily like each individual tree. If you select them all, you select them all and go back to object and then path. Oh wait. There's a merging. I can't, oh my gosh, I can't remember. Oh, sorry, I think it's under Pathfinder. Yeah, so I'll just do that again. So to create like a merge kind of canopy or just show the canopy, select all the shapes and then go to window, and then scroll down to Pathfinder, and it'll give you these options. So what it'll do is essentially merge all the lines together to create one shape. So see how they're all individual. I tend to do this at the very end, just in terms of sometimes it's hard to go backwards once you've like closed the file and opened it up. I tend to like merge it all at the very end. But if you want to merge shapes, Pathfinder, and then it's the first option should do so. So then that way it just shows the canopy versus each individual one. Does that make sense?
That's great. That's great. And then if you want to leave it unfilled, can you just show that too one more time? Thanks.
So select everything that you want to edit, and then here shows the fill and the stroke, and then as well as the top. And then also on this part as well, just click the none to fill, and then that way it just shows the outline as well.
And then merging the pathways then without the fill.
Okay, that actually probably will show it better. So select everything, window, Pathfinder, merge.
And then turn on the base again. Yeah. Perfect.
See how you
see that. Perfect.
Yeah. And then you can also adjust that as well. But yeah, I recommend probably doing it at the very end, merging it all, just in case you have to make any adjustments to where your tree placements are. But yeah, that's also a great tool to do.
Maybe just show, for example, say you draw a tree in, I don't know, say the scale bar north arrow layer, and then you want to bring it to the tree layer. How do you drag that?
So
yeah.
Let's say, yeah, so. Let's say, okay, so I'm on this layer. Let's say I'm just gonna draw a circle. So let's say I drew a tree on the wrong layer or any object on the wrong layer, and I want to change it afterwards. So when I select that object on your layers, on the layers manager on the sidebar, it'll show you the layer it's currently on, but to change that, let's say I want to move it to the tree layer, you could just select this and move it upwards and see how the color changes when you move it on that layer. Yeah, so that's kind of just a simple way to change the layer. And then I can also show, let's say.
And then if there's a number of objects, you just could hit select, like control select to highlight them all. Okay.
Yeah, so let's say I wanted to move. Sorry, the site plan was just throwing me off. So let's say I wanted to move all these objects onto one in particular layer. Right now they're on multiple layers, but I want to, let's say, move them to roads. You can just directly move them after you've hit shift and then selected them all. Then you can just drag it down to the desired layer, and then they should all show up there as well. So yeah, it'll, yeah, like I said before, the colors will just change depending on the layer it's on. And then again, let's say I had two separate objects. So I have this one on the pathways layer and then this one on the north arrow one. So since this one's on this one, it should be showing, I'm just gonna put on a fill. So this is easier to show. So see how the tree layer is on top of this one. Let's say I move this layer to the very top of the list. See, now it's showing above. So that's another way to kind of change how the objects are showing in space. Or if you, let's say, they're on the same layer, this is also important to know. So let's say they are on the same layer, but you still wanted to show that one was above another or vice versa below. So since they're both on the pathways layer, but I wanted the trees below or above, sorry, go to object and then arrange, bring to the front, and that will also do that as well within that layer. And then there's also, I don't think for this assignment, you probably won't need to get into sublayers, but that can also help you organize your drawing as well. But basically if you keep your layers organized and then keep, if you use just the arrange tool, you should be able to do so without it getting too complicated. So just keep those things in mind. So for example, again, let's say I wanted to move this one back up. If I go or move it down, arrange, bring to the back, it'll just show it below that other object. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. I think we'll stop for today. I think there was a lot. So we'll pause for today. Let's leave some